So we're starting chapter 9, which is racial and ethnic relations. The first chapter is race, ethnicity, and the social structure. At a glance, sociologists, like other social scientists, reject the idea that races are biologically distinct. Ethnicity is a social category based on a set of cultural characteristics, not physical traits. Sociologists acknowledge that a society's dominant groups enjoy a position of power and privilege in comparison to minority groups or groups who are singled out and treated unequally. The main idea of race, ethnicity, and the social structure. Race, ethnicity, and minority groups are important factors that shape the social structure of the United States. Questions to consider. To what extent is race both a myth and a reality? Which cultural characteristics help define ethnicity? What is a minority group? Race as myth and reality. What is race? In the minds of many Americans and many people the world over, it is the idea that humankind can be sorted into biologically distinct groups called races. One of the key assumptions underlying this view is that biologically pure races can exist. People can be assigned to one racial category, separate from all the others, based on observable physical characteristics such as skin color, hair texture, and facial features. They can be African American or Hispanic, white or Asian, Native American or Arab American. Using this view of race, a person would have to belong only to one group or the other. Biologists, geneticists, and social scientists overwhelmingly reject this view of race. Some go as far as to call biological race a myth, a product of the human mind, and a story long told. At the most basic level, biologists sort living creatures into groups called species, not races. The dividing line between species has to do with reproduction. Organisms from different species cannot produce offspring. Because all people belong to the same species, the human species, no such barrier divides the over 7 billion people who inhabit Earth. Moreover, contemporary studies of genetics suggest that inherited traits such as skin color and hair texture are superficial indicators of genetic similarity. Geneticists have found that far more genetic variation exists within racial groups than between racial groups. For example, imagine two sets of men. In one set, there's a tall man and a short man of the same race, and in the other, there is an African American man and an Asian American man. If you could examine their genetic code, their DNA, which set do you think would be most genetically different? The result may surprise you. There's far more genetic variation between the tall man and the short man. While each cell of the human body has about 100,000 genes, only about 6 of those control for skin color. By contrast, dozens of genes affect a person's height. Biologically speaking, race may be a myth, but the idea of race is still very much a reality. How can this be so? Race is real in a social sense. Assigning people to racial groups has tremendous social significance, and racial distinctions are powerful because people attach meaning to them. In other words, racial differences become real and important because people believe they are so. Later, you will read or listen about some of the most severe consequences of racial thinking, which vary from prejudice and discrimination to slavery and genocide. For these reasons, almost every sociologist looks at race from a social perspective. In sociological terms, a race is a category of people who share observable physical characteristics and whom others see as being a distinct group. For sociologists, the important issue is not that a person has a specific color of skin or hair of a certain texture. Rather, sociologists are concerned with how people react to these physical characteristics and how these reactions affect individuals in society. Although the terms race and ethnicity are often used interchangeably, sociologists assign each term a different meaning. They use the term ethnicity to refer to the set of cultural characteristics that distinguishes one group from another group. Like most other societies, American society consists of people of different cultural backgrounds. People who share a common cultural background and a common sense of identity are known as an ethnic group. Ethnicity is generally based on such cultural characteristics as national origin, religion, language, customs, and values. If an ethnic group is to last over time, its cultural beliefs and practices must be passed from generation to generation. Some ethnic groups in the United States have been more successful than others in keeping their heritage alive. For example, Asian Americans and Hispanics tend to have strong ethnic roots. In contrast, many generations of German Americans who were raised in the United States no longer feel deep ties to their ancestral homeland or its cultural traditions. Consequently, they share few cultural characteristics with people in Germany. In some cases, ethnic identity crosses racial or national boundaries. Jews worldwide are thought to form an ethnic group. This ethnic group status is based on a shared religious and cultural heritage. Even Jewish people who no longer firmly hold to the religious beliefs of Judaism are linked by factors such as a common history. Ethnicity and race refer to two separate sets of characteristics. Ethnicity is based on cultural traits. On the other hand, race is associated with physical traits. Nevertheless, some ethnic groups are also racially distinct. For example, African Americans are viewed as a racially distinct group in the United States. Many African Americans also share a common ethnic heritage that includes particular foods, types of music, form of speech, and cultural traits. Similarly, groups such as Mexican Americans, Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans, and Native Americans can be classified both ethnically and racially. Of course, no particular physical feature or ethnic background is superior or inferior to any other. However, many sociologists recognize that people who hold power in a society may place an arbitrary value on specific characteristics. By establishing the values and norms of society, dominant group members consciously and unconsciously create a social structure that operates in their favor. Speaking the language most common in a society is one position of power held by the dominant group. Using a conflict theory approach, many sociologists argue that a dominant group's position of power allows its members to enjoy certain privileges, such as better housing, better schools, and higher incomes. The resources and rewards found in society are limited. Consequently, the privileged position of the dominant group is often gained at the expense of minority groups within the society. In the 1940s, sociologist Lewis Worth defined a minority group as a group of people who, because of their physical characteristics or cultural practices, are singled out and unequally treated. As a result, minority group members view themselves as objects of collective discrimination. You should be aware that, used in this sense, the term minority has nothing to do with group size. For example, in South Africa, white people made up about 15% of the population during the second half of the 1900s. Yet, for much of that time, they dominated the lives of the other racial groups in the country. Similarly, in many countries across the globe, women are a minority group. Minority status, then, is not related to group size, but to the group's unequal standing in society in relation to a dominant group. Sociologists use the term dominant group, not majority, to refer to the group that possesses the ability to discriminate by virtue of its greater power, privilege, and social status in a society. For example, in American society, white people with Northern European ancestry, often called white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, are the dominant group. Certain characteristics distinguish minority groups from other groups in society. The group possesses identifiable physical or cultural characteristics that differ from those of the dominant group. Group members are the recipients of unequal treatment at the hands of the dominant group. Membership in the group is an ascribed or assigned status. Group members share a strong bond and a sense of group loyalty. Members tend to practice endogamy, marriage within the group. To be considered a minority group, a group must exhibit all of the above characteristics. Exhibiting only one or two of the characteristics is not enough. For example, blue eyes are an identifiable physical characteristic. and having blue eyes is an ascribed status. However, blue-eyed people do not face challenges because of their eye color. Consequently, they are not considered a minority group. Haitian Americans in the United States or Aborigines in Australia, on the other hand, are often treated differently because of their ethnic and racial background. Therefore, they are considered to be minority groups. Mr. Happy Monday.